So, one thing I didn't know that I was going to think about a lot of my practice was family. I'll tell you why. I knew immediately I didn't want to be a family law attorney because of, the potential for arguing about the money and the kids. So I thought I'd be safe from those disputes if I dealt with real estate. But of course, lo and behold, that brings family issues with it as well. And the reason why real estate, I feel like, does that is because the value of the real estate. So for most people, our most priciest possessions tend to be our real estate. So let me tell you a story, one that may be common to you. So let's say grandma, grandpa, they buy a property, right? They raise some kids. So let's just say they're 5 kids, and, that's a family home, right? So there's a couple of sisters, couple of brothers. Grandma and grandpa worked really hard. They saved on the property. They paid the mortgage. They paid the taxes. And, what comes with life is someone passes, right? So that family home, which was a source of a lot of memories and a lot of pride for the family, can cause fallout. Stop me if you heard this story before. Where do you think I'm going with this? So those 5 siblings who shared those family moments in their memories, they become 5 strangers. So what I mean by that is that after those 5 family members, they all of a sudden start fighting. You have one family member saying, that property, dad promised me that. Another sibling said, well, you know what, mom promised me that. Or they have another family member who says, you know what, I've lived here and I've cared for mom and dad and you all have done nothing. So in my opinion, they feel that it should be their property. So you have 5 people. Let me tell you what the law is, at least here in Illinois. If someone passes without a will or a trust, you know who becomes the owner of that property? If both spouses are deceased, it becomes the property of all 5 children. Now, these are the 5 children who grew up together. These are the 5 children who played games together. If you were fighting then, you're probably fighting now. So it's to the point where these 5 family members are essentially arguing over the generational home, arguing over the legacy. It gets nasty. I mean, I've had people, produce false wills. I've had people, essentially call the police on each other, and it becomes a mess. And if you don't have paperwork in place, they'll go to probate. So let me tell you what probate is. I'll probably insert a slide here in terms of what probate is. But probate is the official legal oversight over the transfer of assets. Since there is nothing in place, essentially what we're doing is the judge has to oversee to make sure that the rightful heirs become the owner of the property. In Illinois, you're looking at least $3,000, and that's a low end. Let's say $5,000 up if you have to go through probate. Now, if it's contested, you might as well plan to pay $10,000 to $20,000. Contested means that the siblings are fighting. Contested means that no one agrees what should happen to the property. And you know what happens outside of the legal fees? You're paying the court system, you're fighting, you're losing, you're paying property taxes. So the value of the state is diminishing. So that's contested probate. So back to my story about family and how I originally thought that dealing with real estate, I wouldn't deal with family. No. I deal with a lot of family drama. So family drama can be avoided if we write out simple plans. And, I was talking to one client and they said, you know what? I am the oldest son. And as the oldest son, I get the house. No. That is not true. This does not exist, especially here in Illinois. I told you, if both parents pass, it becomes the property of the children. Now, what happens if one of the children pass? Now, this is when it gets real crazy. Let's say those 5 kids I was telling you about. What if one of the 5 kids dies? You know what happens to that share? If that person passes after their parents passed, their share goes to their kids. So essentially now you have 4 siblings dealing with their nieces and nephews. They couldn't even get along with their siblings. Now they have to bring in the next generation of nieces and nephews. So you can see how complicated that can be. So the reality is that, death brings out many thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and we never know how someone responds. Sometimes people grieve in very mean, nasty, ugly ways. And some people become passive and forget about it. So maybe, your family is not the type to necessarily fight. Maybe they're the type of family that grieves, and they grieve in a manner that causes them to enact. Inaction can also cause a family great harm because they're not paying the property taxes. You may know someone who had a family property, and there was never any fighting. It was very clear one person lived in the house and took care of the property, but they forgot to pay the property taxes. They've literally lost their family legacy by not taking care of the business of maintaining the home. Families are great. I don't mean this to be a sob story. I don't mean this to be a sad story. I'm just telling you the realities of what I deal with as a real estate attorney, as a probate attorney. You probably might know someone who's been through this before. So this is just a reminder to have a conversation with someone. It could be your family member, your mother, your father, your aunt, your uncle, your own property where you want to avoid those issues. So my thought of the day is, to keep the fighting down, to maintain the family relationship, just write things down and have things in place. I promise you, if you write it down, they're not going to die. I promise you, well, we're all going to die. What I mean is that it's not signing off saying that this is something that is going to happen the next day. It's just a part of life. And knowing that this is a part of life, one of the greatest gifts we can do for ourselves and each other is just writing down a plan so that there's, less trauma and conflict. So, another piece I want to put here is that if you're dealing with a stubborn family member and they refuse to write things down, I like them to tell them you failing to act is a choice. So by you choosing not to fill out the paperwork, you're essentially saying, I choose a court to become a part of this process. I choose my family to have to go in front of the judge. I choose my family have to hire and pay for an attorney. Those are choices you're making. So if you have a stubborn family member that refuses to put things in writing, just let them know that their choices have consequences. So this is a part of my day-to-day. I figured I'd just come outside and put this out on video because I figured someone needs to hear it. So if someone says, what should I do to avoid this? A will is great. A trust is better. A trust avoids probate. It allows you to name a beneficiary and not have to go through the probate court system. So, when you're thinking of families and you're blessed enough and fortunate enough to have a home, have real estate, have property, put it in a trust, do an estate plan, and then we can avoid some of this drama. Well, thanks for listening to me talk on my walk. Hope it was useful to someone. All right, thanks. And if you want more information like this, feel free to subscribe. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.